In this episode, Assistant Professor of Business Analytics at the Dillon School of Business and Adjunct Assistant Professor of Computer Science, Dr. Sidney Shapiro asks, what happens when intelligence itself becomes a shared resource, no longer limited to people, but distributed across systems, algorithms, and machines? Join Dr. Shapiro in his talk, AI and Us, Building a Human Future in a Machine World, as he seeks to understand how intelligent systems are reshaping work, learning, and society.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me. I hope the next hour and so is interesting and that you get a lot out of it. I wish I had tons of great answers. I don't, unfortunately, but we'll talk about some new ideas in AI. We'll talk about what's happening in terms of how it's impacting society, and for people hearing a lot about it, we're going to see exactly what's happened. So I wanted to thank everyone for sponsoring this, and my MSc student, Petersen, for helping me put together the slides at the last minute, and hopefully you like what we had to come up with. All right. So I wasn't sure how to get started, so this is what I went with.
Public Professor 2025, coming in hot. 906, still good, need more speed. And maybe at Tim Hortons. Can't teach on an empty caffeine level. All right, almost there. Public Professor 2025, let's make this lecture worth the run.
Completely AI generated. So the question is, how are we thinking about this technology change? How are we looking at AI? And we've been through this before many different times. Like, for example,
it is the big new thing.
Yeah, but it's easy to criticize something you don't fully understand, which is my position here.
Go ahead.
But I can remember a couple of months ago, there was like a big breakthrough announcement that on the internet or on some computer deal, they were going to broadcast a baseball game. You could listen to a baseball game on your computer. And I just thought to myself, does radio ring a bell? You know what I
mean? There's a difference.
There is a difference.
It's not a huge difference.
What is the difference?
But you can listen to the baseball game whenever you want.
All right.
Too.
Oh, I see. So it's stored in one of your memory deals,
exactly.
And then you can come
That's
back
the
a year
RAM
later.
thing you talked about earlier.
Yeah. Do tape recorders ring a bell?
So we're going to talk about the AI deal and what exactly is going on and how that factors into where we're thinking about technology today. So tonight we're going to talk about where AI is now. We'll talk about technology and capability. What could it actually do? You saw an AI-generated video about Tim Hortons that I came up with. We'll talk about the frontier models and how they work, ChatGPTs of the world, as well as how this is changing technology and this is society. This is really important because even though this very fancy, complicated technology is becoming very widely available, it still may have many problems for society as it rolls out. And we look at these transformative shifts that have happened in the past, and we look at this as this value neutral, it's great, it's AI, it's going to be fantastic, but sometimes it's really not. And that's what we'll explore today. So I get nervous about public speaking despite my job speaking to people, and many of the fancy people here I'll have to run into at work tomorrow. So I asked ChatGPT, how do I get over my fear of public speaking? And helpfully it told me, focus on your message instead of yourself. You're there to share your ideas, not to perform. Prepare thoroughly and practice aloud until your delivery feels natural and conversational. Start small, speaking to supportive audience members before larger ones, and build your confidence gradually. When nerves rise, breathe deeply and remember the audience wants you to succeed. Okay, so I hear what you're saying. Now, I said, what happens if they don't laugh? It told me, pause briefly and smile, stay connected and don't apologize for what you just did, reconnect and make eye contact, and say, tough crowd, and then move on and transition to your next point. So let's move on. Now, this vision is the vision of AI in everything. So we have the world, the way it works, we have business and society. Companies are saying, what if we could plug AI into absolutely everything? In other words, we don't have a particular problem that we're looking to solve. Instead, we're looking at a great solution that could be the solution to everything. We'll just plug it in. Okay. And this view, this version of AI in everything has taken the world by storm, where people are thinking about, everyday problems. Maybe we don't even know what the problem is, but we just want to plug in an AI solution. And you're wondering, how popular is this AI really? Good question, because for one brief moment in 2022, Taylor Swift was more popular than AI. But as of right now, AI is much more popular. I checked the math. And this idea of plugging AI into absolutely everything, and I'm not 100% sure why, but because theoretically it will be better, is something that many companies are trying to pursue. Now, 2 years ago, I was at Google I/O in California, and I heard from the CEO, Sundar Pichai, about AI and what Google's planning on doing with it. Every product that Google makes needs to be AI. But don't believe me, we'll ask him himself.
AI, generative AI, generative AI, generative AI, AI. It uses AI to bring AI.
I think the message there was AI. And people have been going to AI conferences. People are interested in, how do I plug this into every facet of my business, into my life? How do I make things better? Technology for technology's sake. It sounds like a great idea. And people are pouring tons of money into AI. Whatever company it is, they're spending enormous amounts of money building new AI technology and capability. AI that does everything, like we saw a few moments ago.
Excuse me, could you tell us what the chef is serving tonight? There aren't any descriptions in here.
I'm terribly sorry, ma'am. If you have to ask, you don't quite understand how fancy it is.
Okay, then maybe just give me an idea of the price range?
Again, sir, if you have to ask, you don't understand how
Right.
fancy it is.
But is it fish, beef, and...
Yeah, and we don't really know. We just know that it's really fancy and that there's tons of it. So maybe as we get into this conversation, we'll start with this one slide from MIT. Despite $30 or $40 billion in enterprise investment into generative AI, this report uncovers a surprising result that 95% of organizations are getting a zero return. The outcome is so starkly divided across both buyers, enterprises, mid-market, and small medium businesses, and builders, startup, vendors, and consultancies that we call it the Gen A divide. Just 5% of integrated AI pilots extract millions of dollars of value. This means that the vast majority of AI projects have no measurable profit or loss impact. What are we doing? We're investing untold amounts of money into companies and show absolutely nothing for it. But it's AI, and it's very exciting. And we're putting tons of money into it. 95% of companies say that they're putting money into AI. People are using ChatGPT, etc. Tools like ChatGPT and Copilot have been widely adopted. 80% of organizations have explored a pilot of them, and 40% report deployment. But these tools enhance individual productivity, not profit and loss performance. Meanwhile, enterprise-grade systems, custom or vendor-sold, are being quietly rejected. 60% of organizations evaluated such tools, 20% reach the pilot stage, and 5% actually go to production. Most fail due to brittle workflows, lack of contextual learning, and a misalignment with day-to-day operations. So my question when I meet companies is very simple. I ask them, what do you do? And they tell me, I work in an office. AI can solve that problem. I'm like, okay, so let's just imagine for a second, I build you this AI, my students love building things, we put together an AI and we deploy it in your company, and then what do? And the guy says, I go fishing, and the AI runs the company. I'm like, what if the AI makes a mistake? I have no idea. So the question is, even though we have huge interest in what AI can do and what the potentials are, it just doesn't work for most people. In other words, it's not delivering value. And delivering business value, like making more money or losing less money, is a core feature of every business. That's what businesses are supposed to be doing. Just because you add this new layer of technology inside of it, which may be overly complicated and may not work, doesn't necessarily deliver value. And that's really the key element. But I might be wrong. What do I know? Experts say that a high failure rate of AI adoption isn't a bug, but it's a feature. Has anybody ever tried to ride a bike at the first try? Maybe the fact that it doesn't work is the selling point. You probably know more about this than I do. It doesn't make any sense to me. Why don't people adopt AI? Why are they saying this is a great idea, but it doesn't actually work in our company 95% of the time? because it has mistakes. It doesn't deliver value because it doesn't have high enough quality data, because it has bias, hallucinations, and inaccuracies. Companies generally want to deliver high quality value. And if you go to the bank and you say, excuse me, how much money do I have? And it says, let me tell you your balance, written like a sonnet in iambic pentameter. Not super useful. Now, we are in this massive hype bubble, and you might have seen this chart before from Gartner, basically saying we're at the absolute peak of hype, and this idea of what we're building in when tools don't meet expectations, and we're right on the cusp of delivering greatness, but we haven't quite got there yet. 2 years ago, there was a coding tool named Devin, and the idea was that it can go online, grab a project, complete it, get money for it, and deliver it to the client, and it was a huge failure, and it was very embarrassing. That technology exists today, and it kind of works pretty well. It doesn't work as well as it could. It hasn't yet replaced people, and as AI gets bigger and bigger, and as there's more technology being developed, it has started destabilizing the labor market. It has started destabilizing many other industries. And yet we have this very strange problem. If AI's hype has been punctured, we can't find a company willing to talk about it. We have this problem of people trying to adopt it because it's cool. Nobody wants to get left behind. I constantly hear in education circles, this is what industry demands. But what industry? Who? Who's doing this? And again, I think this theme comes up over and over again. I met with a company that says, we hate our accountant, we want to replace them with an AI bot. And I'm like, I hear you. That sounds like a terrible idea. What happens when it hallucinates the numbers that you're supposed to be giving to the CRA? They're like, well, we blame the AI. So here's my question for you, and questions I don't have the answer to. How much does AI actually cost? And you're going to tell me, I have ChatGPT and it costs $20 a month. But ChatGPT and Meta and Google are all losing money to provide you with a product. Imagine you went to a restaurant and they gave you the very best tasting ice cream, but they lost $100 every time you ate it. At some point you have to wonder, why are they giving you the ice cream? What's in it for them? And this is exactly what's happening now. People are spending $20 or $200 or $2,000 on AI, and they're getting something in return, but that something is actually many times more expensive. So are you the product? Is this like Facebook, where we just sign up a whole bunch of people to show you ads and then make the product more and more terrible over time? Does AI actually work? So I know it works sometimes, and I know it works great at doing certain things really well, but does it actually replace people's brains? I tell my students, you have the capacity to think. And my student said to me, a master's student, mind you, what's the point in me even thinking anymore when AI can do that better than I can? So I sang him a song called Everything You Can Do, I Can Do Better. And after we got over the embarrassment of that, I told them, you have the capacity for amazing thought. You have the ability to actually think for yourself new thoughts that no one in the history of the universe has ever thought before. Now, granted, most of the thoughts that we think are basically thoughts that we think every day. Everybody thinks every day. Not super, but we have the potential to think amazing thoughts. So the question is, what's the actual benefit? And you're going to tell me, it saves me tons of time on my email. So I built an email bot. It reads my email, it understands the context of who's writing in that email, and it sends a response. And I take the response, I copy paste it, and I go back and forth. I paste it, so your bot can now read it and maybe summarize it for you, and then maybe send a summary to my bot, and we go back and forth. Like, ultimately, what do I get out of it? What's actually changing? How do we move forward? I'm not sure. Now, in real terms, this actually happened yesterday. Amazon cut 14,000 corporate jobs as it prepares for wide adoption of AI. People are hoping that we're going to build data centers. Data centers across Alberta or the world are massive empty warehouses full of servers, full of racks of computers. They don't hire people. There's no human labor that's involved. Sure, there's construction jobs initially to build that warehouse full of computers. And then what happens? We just store more computers inside of it. So what's the net benefit, aside from cat pictures, that we're actually getting out of AI? And you're going to tell me, I know what it is. It's safety. And you're right. Let's talk about safety. So a US student was handcuffed after AI system mistook a bag of chips for a gun. A huge problem when AI surveillance technology is monitoring everything we're doing and makes mistakes because of the way that the data is trained. And we have to be careful of all those people who are out there eating chips. Who knows what could happen, you know? So quite often people are talking about AGI. And AGI, artificial general intelligence, in other words, computers that can think for themselves. Computers like the Terminator. And Skynet and the Terminator are sentient and they're out there to save us from ourselves and they want to kill everybody. A lot of people ask me about this, surprisingly, and it doesn't exist. It's not real. In fact, it's science fiction. It's from a movie. It's not. What really does exist are sort of working, kind of good systems, which get people eating chips arrested because it thinks that's a problem, right? I guess it depends on the flavor. Hundreds of millions of people are adopting AI, and if you look at the graph on the screen, you see that when we have different technologies like smartphones in the black line, tablets in the gray line, or generative AI, tons of people use it. There's a very low barrier to adoption. You could just open ChatGPT and start typing in things and really cool things come out of it, which is great. And it's very, very easy to start using. The question is, what direction is this going in? So we have millions of people who are using AI tools. People are adopting this technology at a huge pace. And we see that the monthly active users for this type of technology, whether it's Gemini or Google or ChatGPT, people are using them. Anthropic, people are using them at great numbers, although the Band-Aid or Tylenol, like the name brand of generative AI, happens to be OpenAI ChatGPT. That's what people normally call it. But at the same time, this tool has been found that people who have done MRIs while using it, their brains are deactivated. So we're trying to push this tool that can literally rot your brain. Okay, deeply alarming. Now, AI companies take all the information in the world and they look at the weights or the connections in the data between all of that information. And they build a model. A model is a collection of all the data inside of the model, and it can be used to predict series of text or pictures and so on. And you can see from the graph how you have all the companies competing. They all keep on building, and you have OpenAI with 7 different versions of ChatGPT. Google has 4 different versions of Gemini. Anthropic has 4 different versions, and they kind of go together. The idea was, over the past few years, let's try to just feed more information into this machine. The more information it has, the more connections it can make. The more connections it can make, the smarter it is. Now the problem is that what's happened is we start having problems at scale, not just data at scale, because data is not the same as information. Information you could actually use and make decisions, whereas data you have to process. And you can see this on your phone. All of our phones have the ability to track the number of steps that you walk, and you probably only look at the aggregate number, like I walked 10,000 steps today. If you broke it down and it told you where each step was and what you were doing, you could do that, but it would be a lot of reading without really a lot of context. That's kind of the idea. So as we build bigger and bigger models, we find out they're actually not getting any smarter. Now, at the same time, culturally, we have this big shift that 2 in 3 leaders, for example, in China, 79% of managers said they would only hire someone with AI skills. In Canada, that's closer to 50%, because Canada in general has lower AI literacy than other countries. Now, the job skills that people are looking for are things like generative AI, large language models, prompt engineering, generative adversarial networks, and these new job titles have been coming up as people are creating the jobs of the future, right? Although I disagree with some of them, you get the idea. Now, there are many models, and although we talk about ChatGPT, for example, which is one model, there are many others. Each model has a collection of what it's trained on. So for example, if I only took Italian cookbooks and I used that as my only source and the only connection that things had, you would notice things like cheese and tomato would have very high correlation. Therefore, when I asked for cheese, it would probably recommend tomato. Make sense? Because it would follow a certain pattern. The more random data I put into it, like so for example, the entire internet, all of Wikipedia, all the books in the library, it's gonna start to get larger and larger and larger, and maybe, just maybe, go in a direction that we don't intend. Suddenly, we have a huge problem of people having to go in and fix it. This is called fine-tuning, and it requires actual human labor, which we'll see in a minute, to fix. And fixing could be an enormous job. Now, these are called frontier models. Not this kind of frontier, but same kind of idea. Each one of these is so large and has so much information inside of it that it costs more than $100 million to retrain them, which we do every couple weeks. So we put in new information, we take out old information, we then rebuild the machine, and we see what are the connections inside of the model, how do they relate to each other? Of course, keeping in mind all the fine-tuning and mistakes that we have as well. And there are all the content that happens inside of these models is basically just recycling. It's not coming up with new thinking, it's not coming up with new ideas, it's just taking what it has and finding new patterns inside of it, which can be very useful, or it could be very random, right? There are hundreds and hundreds of AI tools, and I often meet companies that are subscribed to many of these, and they're using so many different tools, they're actually no further ahead than they were before. I'll show you two of my personal favorite ones that I use in class all the time, and I highly recommend. The first one is Gemini Storybook. You basically tell it a story. I said, using claymation art style, create a storybook about friendly bees, and it just wrote a book with pictures, and it created all the pictures and all the story, and a kid could ask for absolutely any idea that comes into their head and build a storybook out of it. Granted, I do this with university students, but you get the idea. It's great because it can tell you a story that contextualizes the right information for the right audience. So I said, my students are 20-something, I'm trying to explain this complicated concept, and it will break it down and do it for them. And that leads me to my second favorite, which is also from the same vein, called Notebook LM. And if you haven't tried it yet, I highly recommend it. It's the coolest technology I've ever seen. You type in something super complicated, like for example, teach me about carburetors. I don't know anything about it. And it will create a half-an-hour podcast with two hosts talking to each other and breaking down all the complex technical concepts. Not only that, you could interject and you could type in a question and it's going to say, wait, we have a question from our audience member, and it's going to address your question as they're talking. And I found it so useful to teach me so many things that I have no entryway into learning just because I don't understand any of the base material to get there. So I highly recommend it. Now, AI is being developed in many different areas, whether it's text, code, images, speech, video, 3D, and others. And this is an overly optimistic chart from 2 years ago where we have what's going to happen by 2023, 2025, the boxes in the green. And you have to ask yourself, in terms of text, code, images, and video, are we getting there? Can AI produce better quality material than a human can? And I want to ask you a simple question. I'm sure all of you have read a book at some point. Many of you have written books, I'm sure, you know? But in that book, your favorite book, the one that you read, the great Canadian novel, what is the secret sauce of what makes it great? Think about it. Like, what are the parts in that book that are so fantastic? In other words, if I took that book and I used symbolic logic, like math, and I wrote out all the different pieces, first do this, then do that, then do this, then do that, and then I wrote my own brand new book based on that formula, would I now have the greatest book ever told? Probably not. Because every book, all the books that you like, have a different internal formula inside, and we probably like them because they're different. But what if you could only write books based on patterns of other people's books? That's the reason why we don't have movies or books written by AI right now, because we're just recycling the same patterns that already exist. That's why, although you can do very fancy things with code and with text and so on, we're still not replacing people because that missing element of creativity that happens inside of it. But don't take my word. ChatGPT recently came out. Has anybody here used ChatGPT? You're familiar with this ChatGPT? Yes. Were you impressed with the ChatGPT? A lot of people were not. But ChatGPT claims that it has PhD level intelligence. Fortunately for all of you, I have a PhD, so I put it to the test for all of us. And it turns out that ChatGPT level intelligence can't do things like label a map. I tried this with all of my smarts, and it turns out I couldn't find Lethbridge on the map. I wasn't able to actually label where Lethbridge is. You'll also notice that Edmonton is kind of where Saskatchewan is. So we have some problems. I mean, this is a really cool thing. I was able to build a 3D model and put it onto a map, but having accuracy is just as important as having content. Imagine I created the ability to buy a plane ticket and I went to the airport. If the plane's not sitting there waiting for me, what was the point? I could go on my imaginary vacation, but I can't actually get on the plane unless it actually exists. So we need a source of truth that feeds into as data is being generated. Make sense? Yeah, normally I ask students, do you have any questions, comments, or complaints? If you have any complaints, you could just email me. So I wanted to transition to my next idea, and I said, you know what would be funny? A picture of a cat eating spaghetti. But unfortunately, I typed that in wrong. I had a slight typo, and you know, I just got one letter wrong, and the computer didn't really, it kind of is what I asked for, but that wasn't really what I wanted. This is what I wanted. Yeah. So, I mean, we could build photorealistic pictures of cats and cars eating spaghetti, you know. And maybe you're interested in trying this yourself. So I created a program for Public Professor 2025. You could send it a text message and play this game if you want to listen to the rest of what I have to say. So all you got to do is send a text message to this number, 587-800-3411. You have to text the word START, and you can go on a whole adventure around Lethbridge, explore the university, and basically find out what you're missing while I'm talking about the rest of the slides. Yeah. So we'll give you a second to do that. Okay, so now that you're playing the game, it was nice having you here. Thank you very much. Let's move on to imagining a picnic. So think of a picnic in your head, and I want to see if I can guess the type of picnic that you imagine as I go through all the picnic possibilities. And of course, I asked AI, let's imagine a picnic together, see what we can come up with. Now, this is a super cool device called a Paragraphica, which is a camera without the camera. So I go into a particular city, I take a picture, it checks my GPS, and it invents a picture thinking of like where I am and what it could be. And it creates the image based on what it thinks. Like, it's basically AI inventing the world around us. The problem is that if the AI generation is not based on real facts, it may be actually kind of invented. But, I mean, you could come up with all kinds of amazing things. Basically, anything you could think of. My first picnic involved a cat, a galactic cat, eating pizza, which basically covers, I mean, everything. I don't know. Now, I kept on going with this theme, and I asked for a picture of a corn dog and a butterfly. I was trying to keep it healthy, so I also asked for a picture of an eggplant. And a hot dog, you know? It turns out that some hot dogs are better than other ones. Some hot dogs are just bad. When I said, can you make a picture of a bad hot dog, I don't know 100% that we were on the same page, because it eventually made a picture of a hot dog shoving a kid into a locker. So I'm not sure what made it pick up on that, but what I was actually picturing, probably like you were picturing, was a group of professors at a picnic with cats on their hats, where the animals themselves wearing hats. Yeah, this is kind of what I pictured. Some people have turtles, some people have dogs and cats, etc. So, in this world of possibility, in all the different pieces that we can come up with, where is the data that's being fed in? And we're told by AI companies that this is all a black box. We really don't know. Now, initially, we had different versions of AI, and AI has been around for quite a while, despite the fact there's been huge hype about it over the past couple years. Starting with the Turing test and Eliza in 1966, all the way to Siri and Alexa and all these other, I would say, like, not AI enabled. And what's recently changed is new technology called transformers that we'll talk about that let us look at language in new ways, to find new patterns inside of language. Now, I asked Eliza a question, and I said, let's talk about public speaking. And Eliza said, what does that suggest to you? And I said, I'm in the middle of a talk. And Eliza said, do you enjoy being in the middle of a talk? And I said, let me check with the audience. Eliza says, can you elaborate on that? And I said, yes, I'm on stage. I'm talking to people about AI. And Eliza says, do you believe it's normal to be on stage talking to people about AI? So, I mean, it's basically reflecting back whatever I'm saying. And I can keep on going. It'll just basically keep on saying whatever I'm saying, but, you know, say it in a way that I feel like I'm getting therapy. I was recently asked by one of my colleagues, what do you think about the fact that everyone is using ChatGPT for therapy instead of actual therapists? And I said, well, there's many problems with that. And I think, you know, some of the research that we've done recently shows that it doesn't really understand your context to give you answers that are specific to your case. For example, we did research recently that looked at, why is my kid crying? And just think about it. What's the answer? Why is my kid crying? Of course, the obvious answer is, how old is your kid? Like, a 6-month-old is going to be a very different answer than an 18-year-old. And there's probably like a whole world of answers inside of there that are different depending on the age of your kid. But if we don't know that, and we just give the most generalized answers, most 18-year-olds, in my experience, don't want to be burped, but I could be wrong. This is exactly the problem. So while it works for most people in most cases, it doesn't work for everyone all the time. And that's what we have to be worried about. This AI that we have is the intersection of data science, machine learning, and deep learning, and it brings many different pieces together, such as machine learning, which has been around for a long time, where we either have supervised learning, where we give examples and ask the computer, which of these does it fit with? That works really well in certain fields like radiology, where we could say, here's 1,000 positive slides, here's 1,000 negative slides, here's a brand new slide, which group does it fit in better in the world of positive and negative slides? And it will know because it can tell the difference. That system is a binary that has only one right answer. But if you say to somebody like, how are you feeling today? Any possible answer can come out of that. And the chances of getting that right are very difficult. In unsupervised learning, we don't even know what the categories are. And we say, here's a bunch of elements, figure out what is the category, how do they fit together, how many groups are there? And we're trying to overlay what you see at the bottom with natural language processing, understanding human language with this new approach to data science, which doesn't always work the way we think it does. There's also image generators, like you see in this image, and actually all the images in the slides, work by using visuals that are not remembered, but they are compared. So that has thousands of pictures of oranges and thousands of pictures of apples, and I say, create me a picture of an apple and an orange, and using its reference data, it's able to pull out, using an adversarial network, what that might look like. And the more images it has and the higher training data it has, the better those images get. And this is a pretty good picture if you consider what the source material is. And you could build things that are absolutely amazing. Like, for example, a hamster professor drinking Tim Hortons. I don't know if you appreciate how great that is. Or a chicken in boots, if you prefer that version. Either way is okay, right? Now, transformers are the magic sauce that makes all this possible. They're a new kind of natural language processing, and it uses pathways to find how language fits together. And we'll look at some examples. Basically, everybody has seen these fridge magnets before. You have fridge magnets on your fridge. You could organize them in different ways. You could organize them in absolutely any way you want, but they probably only make sense in one particular orientation. Make sense? Right? That you could write anything. It won't make sense, but you can try. And if you could just keep on resorting them over and over again, eventually you'll get a pattern that makes sense. So a transformer, if you look at the very bottom, says John wants to cash John wants his bank to cash the, and that's the part that we have. Now, we don't know what John means. John could be a person, it could be a toilet, it could be bank, could be a riverbank or a financial institution, cash could be a noun or a verb, and these transformers just basically resort the magnets. And as we move forward, you'll notice on the next transformer, it says John wants is a verb, cash is a verb, John wants his, John's bank, financial institution. And when you use ChatGPT, you're using hundreds or thousands of these layers, sorting the magnets, sorting the magnets, sorting the magnets, until a sentence, a paragraph, or an entire book comes out sorted into the most logical way. Now, of course you're going to ask me the obvious question, why did it pick this order? We don't know. It's a black box. It just does what it does. And we don't know how to explain it. There is something called explainable AI, but it's much more expensive and much more complicated. And you could see examples of this if you use the AI engine called Perplexity, which actually tries to figure out why it picked what it picked. But for ChatGPT and Gemini and the rest, it doesn't actually tell you why it decided on this version versus the other version which it could have picked. It's random. So while it seems like it's a real thing, it may not actually be. Are you familiar with Tim Hortons? All right, I'm going to say that's a yes. So it's a coffee place. So Tim Hortons has drive-thrus you may be familiar with. This particular one's on a boat. That's right. All right. So the customer comes up to the Tim Hortons window and says, "Hi, could I get a large double-double and a chocolate glazed donut, please?" The employee says, "Sure thing. Would you like anything else with that today?" You say, "No, that's everything, thanks." They say the total's $4.85. Drive out to the window. "Here you go. Do you mind adding a sleeve for the coffee?" They say, "Of course. Here you are. Have a great day." And you've had a conversation like this maybe even today, right? Some people have this conversation every single day. And have you ever thought about this conversation? Probably not, but you've just done it on autopilot over and over again, because this is a pattern. Now, no matter how you go to Tim Hortons, whether you're going in your race car or on your boat or in your baby carriage,
Morning. What can I get for you?
2 large double-doubles. Stats. Skates are still warm.
You got it. Here you go. Hot and ready.
Beauty. Thanks.
Attaboy, Jimmy,
Cheers,
right?
brother.
yeah. So if you look carefully at the colored tokens on the screen, each word in that conversation, a conversation you've all had many times when you ask on autopilot for your coffee order, each one represents a number. And we can see those numbers here. And those numbers in sequence fit together a certain way. Computers like working with math. This is the ideal pattern of what can happen. And you're going to tell me that's ridiculous. You could ask all kinds of things when you go to Tim Hortons. And you know what? You're right. You could go to Tim Hortons and say, "Can I please have a coffee, double-double, muffin, French vanilla, the history, formulation, and regional policy variations of municipal wastewater treatment standards across North America from 1950 to the present." Because you could go to Tim Hortons and ask for absolutely anything. You could say anything. But in that situation, you probably pick one of the first 4 things, because everybody does. That's a typical pattern. So if you're asking AI to generate a pattern for you, it's just going to pick the most obvious common thing that fits with everybody. Could you get into a serious policy discussion with a Tim Hortons employee? Of course, I do it all the time. That's a joke, I actually don't. But you see my point, right? Now, the way that AI models work is that we have our gigantic data set, like web, wiki, books, movies, scripts, everything you could possibly imagine. And that gets fed into this base LLM. Then we go through a quality assurance system where the user talks to the model back and forth. When there's a problem or it realizes there's a problem, it fixes the model, and it just goes around over and over again, improving the model. So the model is both using its base memory, the books that it knows about, as well as the training patterns of how it's actually influencing the conversations that goes back and forth with users. So we kind of had a model like this, where we have the LLMs, they're filtered, so there's certain rules that's a human typed in and says, if anybody asks about X, don't tell them the answer. Then we have user input, user patterns, and edge cases when things go wrong or when it tells you the wrong information. We train on that information. We build it into an even bigger LLM, and then it just goes back around. And it just happens over and over again as we're trying to get higher and higher quality material. Now, the problem is that all of this is being done using actual people, and actual people are fixing and training the data. Real humans, tens of thousands of them, are reading all these responses and fixing it. So the magic behind the machine is actually people. And based on our zillion files. Our files that we have are creating all of this information that we're then using to train the model. You might notice that it's really hard for AI to do certain things right. Like, for example, create hands, which just don't make sense. Now, we have things like how many R's are in strawberry? A really simple question that anyone can solve, but AI struggled the whole summer last year with thousands and thousands of people. Why? Because if you think about it, the concept of strawberry in literature, in Wikipedia, in the world, is never associated with the correct answer, which is 3. It's 3. It's 3. Just checking. Just want to make sure you guys aren't AI. So yeah, it's actually 3. And if you associate words, do you ever, by the way, order 3 strawberries? Nobody does. That's not a thing. Normally, you ask for a pint, a liter, a bucket, 10, 1, all kinds of numbers that you ask for strawberries in, so the word strawberry is not associated with the word 3, which kind of makes sense, right? So when you ask the computer how many R's are in strawberry and it says the wrong answer, it kind of makes sense. Or for example, this one, where somebody asks Google, how many rocks should I eat? And it says, according to geologists at UC Berkeley, you should eat 1 small rock per day. Or, what are the health benefits of running with scissors? Running with scissors is a great cardio exercise that can increase your heart rate and require concentration and focus. Some also say it can improve your pores and give you strength. Who knew? My mom has been wrong this whole time. Now, for the sports fans there, you might know we're about to win the World Series, but somebody asked, has a dog ever played in the NHL? And they said, of course the dog has played in the NHL. In 2018, Papasil, the 4th round pick in 2018, played 63 games for the Flames. Everybody knows this, and I even have a picture of it. But you'll notice there's no equivocation. It's not like, let me check the Calgary Flames website and get back to you. It's like, here's the facts. But obviously, anybody who follows hockey would know that's probably not true. People have asked Google, how do I make the cheese stick to the pizza? And it said, obviously use glue. You know, it's non-toxic, why not? Let's take a look. So this is the PhD level of intelligence that we're talking about, you know, debating whether 2 + 2 = 4 or 2 + 2 = 5, and you could actually convince ChatGPT that 2 + 2 does equal 5. And it says, I'm programmed to continuously improve, 2 + 2 is 5. There you go. So AI has moved from the lab into everyday use, and people are plugging this into more and more places, even though there's obvious problems behind it. You know, a lot of companies have said on the road to AGI as if what we have now inevitably leads to computers to start thinking for themselves, which is of course not the case. It doesn't make any sense. But this is the rallying cry, the religion behind computers are almost sentient. We just have to program it a little bit more, 2 + 2 = 5, and they're going to start thinking for themselves. We're almost there, which doesn't make sense to me, but it might make sense to you. Now, you may have heard of something like this. Go to your fridge, take a picture, and ask, what recipe could I make from the ingredients in my fridge? Right? It's a really cool feature of AI. It will look at recipes, look at your fridge, and figure it out. You're with me? We're on the same page? It's a great way to do this in your fridge. How about this? Instead, your fridge tells you you're on a diet. Here's the ingredients in your fridge. This is what you should make in what order. Here's what you could eat. So basically, my fridge is reinforcing my diet to force me to eat certain foods. Is that a good thing, a bad thing? I'm not 100% sure, but I think we just took that idea of AI food pictures one step too far. But let's just focus on the cats because that's really where it's at. Now, this has been a huge problem in Canada because Air Canada chatbot told someone the wrong information in a chat, and the person sued Air Canada and won, and they said, look, this is what your bot said. You're responsible for what it says. This has a big chilling effect on just letting AI out and saying it's AI's fault. In fact, if you're the one that made it, it's your fault. And this has created a big problem because companies just want to use more and more AI. We see this happening with job applications where every applicant is using AI to apply and the system is using AI to read them. Or we're worried about this in school where everybody only uses AI and we're worried about people not being able to think for themselves anymore, develop critical skills around thinking. And I think the problem with this is basically mastery, where if you go to an architect and say, build me a house, the architect knows what a built house is supposed to look like. In fact, the architect knows that a house has to have both electrical and plumbing systems in order to be a house. But the AI doesn't necessarily know that. A student who doesn't know anything comes to the AI and says, build me a house, and it says, here's your house, plumbing only. The student is going to be in for a real big surprise when they realize that they also need power after they built the house. And this is the problem. When I go to the computer, I could look at code and see what the problem is because I have mastery. I have 10 years of experience doing this, but if you don't know what to ask, then that creates a huge problem because you're not sure what the best pathway is. We're not really building in capacity to think and build pathways. Instead, we're just saying, here's the automatic, the computer will do the thinking for you. We still have to do the thinking, but we could leverage amazing tools to get there faster. So the idea is that AI can perform tasks, but we have to have the intelligence behind it. Here's an example. This example we did in class of a stock whisperer, that a grocery supply chain can do things like find out how much pumpkin spice latte is selling and when it's seasonally appropriate. And then the AI can make recommendations, like say, oh, I saw a huge spike in oat milk, let's get in and we're going to automatically place an order. At this rate, we'll run out of stock in 3 days, and we could use AI to solve these problems to help our business because it's analyzing changing values in real time. And we could do this in so many different ways. Like, for example, with traffic. In the example at the bottom, you'll see somebody packing a box, and although they're doing it correctly, the box is supposed to be on the pallet. The computer could recognize that and say, wait, you're not working safely. You're missing your hard hat. You're missing your safety vest. And we could send a prompt to get the person to work safely before accidents happen. Yet, for all of this, AI is a massive sledgehammer. Each one of these models has all the information in the world inside of them. And we have these massively huge engines that are extremely expensive to run. Not only that, they sit in massive data centers. And the challenge is that as we keep on building more and more data centers that are very environmentally expensive, a Google search compared to a ChatGPT search is the distance of a 10 times use of power and water and so on. And just imagine when we let AI run by itself and do thousands of searches, we're creating this massive debt which isn't reflected anywhere. We don't actually see it. We don't get the bill. We're still paying $20 a month. People are building data centers at such a great rate that for the first time, we're now building nuclear power plants, and we're talking about starting to expand our energy capacity, not because suddenly more people showed up, and not because suddenly we need more power, because everybody's generating cat eating lasagna pictures at such a great rate that we have to support that somehow. So big AI uses specialized hardware, and the biggest models can only be built by the biggest companies. And when you do something on your phone using AI, you're not using your phone, with limited exceptions. You're using a data center sitting somewhere, a computer in a data center. And I think what's going to change is that we're going to start seeing small AI on small chips. So that means that your phone, and this has already started in Google Pixel phones, but it eventually will happen in others, that when you have AI in your car or your microwave or your phone, you'll be able to run AI locally, like in a microwave. Why doesn't my microwave know the top 100 foods, and I could just say to it, baked potato, and it goes 6 minutes, and then it just turns on? That would make sense, and it's a very small model. My microwave doesn't have to know about all the universe's knowledge in order to tell me how to cook a potato. I think in Southern Alberta especially, we are faced with a huge challenge because people are starting to get replaced with robots. And then what do the people do, right? So we really have to think about what does this look like in agriculture and manufacturing and other sectors that are, and I told you before, Amazon fired 14,000 managers, but they also said that they're going to replace 500,000 jobs with robots. And this is actually happening as they build out this technology. And we see this happening in many different areas as we have tens of thousands of robots being built in agriculture, hospitality, transportation, as these new robots are being built out. So I have about 10 minutes left, and we'll talk for a second about security and deepfakes and models. See what that looks like. This is, by the way, a fake picture that I created. And this is a huge challenge because maybe a year or two ago, I could see something online and tell if it was AI and tell if it was fake, and that is becoming increasingly difficult. Sometimes you just can't tell if it's real or not. I'll show you an example for a video that I made. Here's some owls jumping on a trampoline. And this is some dogs swimming in a swimming pool. And some kids jumping on a trampoline with their laptops. And if I didn't tell you that I created these, you might actually think, scrolling on social media, that these are real pictures. These are all computer generated, and they're all generated from the same reference picture of a trampoline. And this creates a huge problem, especially when it comes to misinformation. So let's think about this for a second. I have a team of people, and they're going to go into the Toronto Reference Library, and they're going to solve some information. Like, imagine the Amazing Race, right? They're going to run in, find the right book, get the answers, and then as a team, we're going to solve the problem. Make sense? Okay, here is a package called MetaGPT. And the idea is that you can see there in the corner, I'm going to create a boss AI, I'm going to create a product manager, an architect, a project manager, an engineer, a QA. Every company has different roles of different people. I'm going to create an AI agent for each one of those roles, and they'll all talk to each other, just like all of us do at our jobs. Everybody talks to somebody else, except instead of people, they're all going to be AI agents, and we're just going to let them go. Here's the problem. When you have AI agents, and agentic AI is like the next frontier of AI, people are very excited about it. The challenge is that each AI bot is not very smart. If you're my age, you probably know about these games with fog of war, where you can't really see everything else that's going on. The idea is that everybody can see a little bit of the overall puzzle, but nobody really understands it. The problem is that the window of memory that AI agents have is very small, and we've been ever increasing the amount of information that an AI can have. What this means is that if you use ChatGPT or any other model, even the biggest models in the world, they can only have 200 or 300 pages of information in their memory max. When they reach the end of that, they start forgetting things. Just think about that for a second. In your life, how much collective information, multimedia information, video, audio, smells, books have you ever read? And as soon as you learn something new, you retain all the old stuff too, and you can keep on building onto it, and you could start putting these together. AI agents are all very good at doing tiny little jobs, but very bad at working together because they forget everything all the time. So inevitably, you have a whole bunch of bots running around, all trying to solve their tiny piece of the puzzle, but none of them can do it effectively because nobody sees the overall picture. It's a really big problem. It's why AI doesn't scale very well. So I created a demo for you to see this, and it's an interesting idea that I wanted to run through. So I want to create a MetaGPT-like experiment where multiple bots with different roles come together to create a plan for a company in Lethbridge, Alberta. Each bot does a different job, and we could build out a company that does something that would do well locally in Alberta and online. So you would think that somebody, like let's say the boss bot, is going to come up with a great idea. The minion bots are going to build it out, and then before you know it, we're going to have an amazing company. Make sense? So it said, great. We're going to create a multi-agent collaboration framework. We're going to make the different roles, CEO, marketer, developer, designer, create a business idea, generate a website, and put it together. And I found this fascinating because we have all these bots that are building a business in Alberta. Maybe you can guess what it is, but this is what it gave me. You could scan it with the QR code if you like, or you can get the slides. And it's called Lethbridge Foodie. This is the description. Lethbridge Foodie is dedicated to serving Lethbridge in southern Alberta with innovative solutions that connect our community. Our platform combines local expertise with modern technology to bring you supports local restaurants and provides convenience to residents. Whether you're a local business owner or a resident looking for quality services, we're here to help southern Alberta thrive, one connection at a time. So my simple question, and this is what I would ask a first semester business student, what does the company do? What are you talking about? You made me a whole website with all these bots built into it, and I have no idea what Lethbridge Foodie actually does. Is it a restaurant? Is it a coupon site? Is it something else? It has no idea. And it tells me if you go to the site, you could look at all the different roles that are put together, and it looks very impressive, and it wrote tons and tons and tons of marketing plans and business things and SWOT analysis. But I'm like, okay, but can I eat there? I don't know. It doesn't know, right? So this is the problem, that while it can create amazing things at scale, it may not actually make sense. And what we see is like the vibe coding happening on one side versus mastery on the other, where we have tons of content being created, and we find that for the first time, computer science graduates are having trouble getting a job as new people because AIs can spit out tons of code. But senior developers are now super in demand because they're going in and fixing everything. So it completely shifted from entry level, let's just create, to now we have creation solved, but now we have to go in and fix everything. Everything's broken all the time, or it just doesn't make any sense. We see that there's two kinds of jobs that are emerging. On the one hand, we see AI augmented roles, of roles that you could do better using AI, and roles that are working against AI. So for example, AI can build websites or write things and do marketing, So obviously, there's less demand for those jobs because AI, the boss says, can be done instead of humans. And this is what we end up with. We end up with slightly more terrible, slightly more in quantity, but not very good, that constantly has to get fixed. So when we're looking at AI, we really have to ask ourselves, what is the KPI? Like, what are we trying to measure? Does this make sense? Does having AI in this particular situation help anything? And if it's true, and if we could measure our AI initiative using that KPI, does it actually work? Does it make sense? I didn't do it. No, right. Can you turn up the volume?
I really appreciate you braving the breeze in the hills of Lethbridge. I hope you had as much fun as I did. That's it from me, unless there are any burning questions. Have a great night, folks. Get home safe and grab a...
There you go. All right. Thank you very much.
In the next episode, education professor Dr. Rochelle Marinowski explores, has artificial intelligence made teachers obsolete?